Welcome to podcast 50 in the series of Who Let the Master Out. Last episode, I shared 3 things that those from the other side wanted us to know. 1, they're waiting for us to hear them. 2, they're happy over on the other side, very happy. And 3, they are not themselves. Well, they are their real selves, not this character they played anymore. And in today's episode, I was guided to share my experience when my communication with those who have passed back to the other side exploded. In 2016, it seemed that I was consistently coming across stories or videos depicting mediums or seers, whether it was on Facebook or YouTube or emails on TV or through personal conversations with my friends. I was always drawn in and excited to see their interactions and how they helped individuals find peace with their perceived losses. But I also thought to myself, if I saw a dead person, I would probably poop my pants. I'm sure I'm not alone. Deep down, though, I knew I'd never be given anything that I wasn't ready for. Like aliens from another planet, they would slowly make themselves known to me so I wouldn't have a heart attack upon our first meeting. And that is exactly what they did that entire next year. They were ready to make closer encounters with me, and evidently, so was I. Everything always unfolds perfectly. I meet so many amazing friends through so many of my current amazing friends who started as friends of amazing friends. It's amazing, ain't it? Well, in January of 2017, I drove to a small town near Colorado Springs, where I was living at the time, in order to visit a fairly new friend of mine. We were having a great lunch conversation at a restaurant, and she shared a recent experience that she had with her family. And they were staying up at a family cabin up in the Colorado mountains. Her brother, who had died, had also been an important influence in her son's life. And one day up there in the mountains, her son was talking about his uncle to a friend of his when they looked up in the sky and he saw a cloud in the form of a broken heart. He thought, oh, geez, that's what he needed to see. But then the heart melted together to become whole. What a great message. Later, my friend was walking around a small body of water near the cabin with her daughter-in-law, talking about what her son had experienced. And just then, they found a heart-shaped stone. And that alone seemed like it would be a miracle, yet they ended up finding 7 more heart-shaped stones as they walked around the small lake. I love the signs that those who are back home give us. We only need to pay attention. So her story sparked me to tell her what had been happening to me that last year. And she happens to be a shaman, so she understands, where I was coming from and was excited for what my year might hold. We returned to her house after lunch, and I was starting to get ready to leave, and I asked her, hey, would you like a card reading before I go home? She grinned and replied, yes, how could I turn down a reading? So we sat down in her living room, and she cleared off her coffee table, and I brought out my cards. Well, the moment that I took my cards out of their little bag, something felt different. The presence I normally felt was more. And it felt as if there was this invisible curtain of some kind to my left, and I sensed that there were people standing behind it. Oh crap, I said out loud to my friend. I think people want to come through the card reading. she smiled and said, "Let's do it." And what a perfect environment it was for me for my first time having loved ones from the other side, want to come through during a reading. I felt comfortable. I felt like a safety net below me. This friend of mine, she's so loving, so supportive, and connected to the spirit world. It was just perfect. So I handed her the cards to shuffle, as I always do. And as she was handling and mixing the cards, two fell out on the floor face down. She picked them up and handed them to me, and I was told, "These are for later," so I placed them face down to the side on the coffee table. She finished shuffling and handed me the card deck back. I looked at her with excitement and nervousness. I set the stack down, and usually I'm told to separate it into piles, but this time I wasn't told to separate it in piles at all, just left it in one big pile to the left. I looked at her, and I took a deep breath, and I drew the first card. When I turned it over, it was the Lover's card. A huge heart set in the center of the card. Her brother was here. We both looked at each other and just laughed. "No frickin' way!" We're like, "Yep, yes way." So I pulled 3 more cards for her brother and from him, and she said it was all right, on track. I told her I should just stop now and leave the reading at success because fear was trying to creep in. But the people behind the veil pushed me, saying, "Nope, a total of 4 of us are going to be coming through today." Oh, no. My friend, of course, encouraged me as well, so I turned over the next card, and it was a card that had 4 prongs extending from its center. And I felt that it was a female who was one of 4 siblings. That's what the 4 prongs were. My friend confirmed that that would be her mom, who had 3 siblings, and that it made sense that she would be right next to her brother, since they had a very close relationship while they were here in the physical realm. And again, the other 3 cards I pulled for her mother and from her mother were right on target. Again, I told my friend I should stop, but we both knew that wasn't happening. So I turned over the 3rd card. And this time it depicted a pregnant woman who was ready to give birth. I knew that it represented the loss of a baby, but I was not prepared for that. I mean, how could I bring that subject up? I started to panic inside, and fear started to arise. So I began to tell her that it could be someone who passed in childbirth, and my amazing friend interrupted me and said, "Or a miscarriage?" I looked up at her and said, "Yes." Then came the message from the baby, who was now speaking to me from a mature young adult form behind the little veil. And she shared that those who give us our biggest, darkest experiences here are those with whom we have a special connection on the other side. We all love each other unconditionally back home, but we kind of create these bonds with certain souls and have adventures with them in this realm and others. So when we want a tougher experience in this realm, it kind of takes someone closer to us to be willing to take on that character in our play. So this soul appearing in this young woman's body went on to share that the original plan was for her to be born and then pass away as a very young child. But painfully, she said, she just didn't want to go through it all. She said she was just being lazy, and she laughed. But she also knew that the loss my friend would feel from the miscarriage was going to be enough to fulfill the experience that my friend wanted to have here. She shared she had never left her side and had taken on a role of helping my friend along her path. Boy, I didn't see that coming at all, and neither did my friend. We both just laughed at this information as it sunk into our heads. As I drew the other 3 cards for this child and from this child, I was given a flash of a picture in my head. A woman with long, straight blonde hair was holding a little girl with blonde, curly hair. And when I shared this with my friend, she mentioned that she had been very young when she had the miscarriage, and she didn't know what the gender of the baby was. But during her pregnancy and after the miscarriage, she had often dreamt of a small girl with curly blonde hair. Wow. 1 card to go. By this time, I only jokingly said again, maybe I should just stop now. My friend just smiled and looked down at the deck, ready for the next card. So I pulled it and turned it over slowly. This time it was the schizophrenia card. Now, at first, our minds would jump to a conclusion that it was someone who had killed themselves or suffered great mental duress, but they made it very clear that this was not the case. And as I shared this with my friend, I told her it was not someone who was mentally ill, but someone who would have been known as crazy, meaning someone who acted so far outside the norm that people referred to her as the crazy lady. And she knew exactly who it was right away. And the schizophrenia part also fit in because that person had been many things to my friend during the time she was here. And again, the 3 additional cards that I pulled for her and from her were confirmation. And we were really blown away. I mean, at this point, I was just trying to get my head wrapped around what had just happened. And then my friend asked about, what are those 2 cards that were dropped on the floor over there? What were those for? I was like, oh my God, I almost forgot those. So I turned them over, and the first card was a male monk with a praying mantis on his finger. And the other was a card with 3 females dancing in a circle in celebration. And I stared at them, and my friend moved the male card above her brother, and the 3 women on the card, she moved that above the row of the 3 females. And in my mind, I heard, see, you weren't going to get away with quitting in the middle of anything. And they busted up laughing. It's a common theme among those who speak to us from the other side. Sass and laughter. I offer a special thank you to my dear friend who gave me permission to share this personal moment with the world. It has been the foundation for so many more readings that have impacted many individuals. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Those 4 main cards, the heart, the 4-pronged symbol, the pregnant mother, and the schizophrenia card, along with the 2 cards that had fallen from the deck, became indicators and supporters for me as I began to allow communication from loved ones from the other side to enter my readings. When those cards appear, they don't necessarily represent those specific individuals who visited my friend that day, but they do tell me that guides and angels are present. My friend gave me permission to share her original reading with anyone and in whatever way I felt guided. I normally keep readings private because the messages are usually intended just for them, but in this case, it seemed they wanted a broader audience to hear. Shortly after that first reading, I began to share that experience with several others in my life. And each time, I found myself telling them about certain additional aspects of that original reading. And whenever I mentioned the portion about the loss of a child, it was like this hand slapped me upside the back of my head, which was the indicator to me that this was especially appropriate for the individual. And each time, the recipient of the reading had either a miscarriage, an abortion, or someone having lost a child in the early years of its life. All were such personal, heartbreaking stories for a parent to experience. If you've had any of these happen in your life, know that you are not alone, and that the soul of that child is always with you, loving you unconditionally. They are not gone. They're just not here physically. In each of all the readings that I did right afterwards, at least one of the 6 cards appeared. And this deck has close to 80 cards in it. And in one reading, 5 of the 6 cards came up. And as we were finishing up, the recipient said, I feel like I'm supposed to have one more card. So I cut the deck in half. I just grabbed the deck, and there it was in the middle, the 6th card. I'm no longer surprised by how much the souls on the other side want to communicate with us. We have a large crowd of cheerleaders who are always in our corner, providing unconditional love energy all the time. Sometimes we're aware of it, but until we are more awake, much of our time each day is focused on and even governed by our fears. But they are there. Trust me. Next episode, I'm going to share some experiences that happened to me where those from the other side began to speak to me without the use of cards. It's some pretty hilarious stuff, so I hope you stay tuned. Until then, write a letter to a dear one who has passed that you want to hear from. Because the moment you sit down to write, they're going to be right there beside you, bumping your arm or tickling your ear or knocking something over, or maybe even having a little butterfly knock against your window. Just be aware. Take some deep breaths. Let the fear go. Let your inner master out to play in this amazing amusement park. You deserve it. I love you.